Hello friends, it has been a while. So I want to do just a quick and simple reading wrap up for all the books that I read in July. I only read one book in June, which is why we're not even touching that. But I wanted to do a quick one just to check in. Let's just jump right into it. So I'm going to go over the audiobooks I read first, which might make it a little bit out of order, but not too much. The first audiobook I finished is also the first book that I finished, and that is So You Want to Talk About Race. I finished this book on the 4th of July by Ijeoma Oluo. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce that. So obviously, in America, there's a lot going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, and when everything started up again, I wanted to become as well informed as possible about what was going on, because I'm a white person who's never had to deal with it myself, and I've definitely heard about things and learned certain things, but I wanted to expand on what I knew. And so this was the first book to kind of be my introduction into that. It is her story about talking about race, and I thought it was a great way to start. Even like just the conversation within myself and understanding what all is happening. So I ended up giving that book a 5 out of 5 and would definitely recommend it for those reasons. When I took that book out from the library, the audio, I also took out When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir by Patrisse Cullors and Asha Bandel. So that looks like, that's a little fuzzy, but that's mainly the cover. And again, that's the story of these two people who were very integral in the forming of the Black Lives Matter movement, and they kind of talk about what happened within their own lives, specifically with the one person's brother, and also what was happening with the world at large, that kind of led to the official formation of this movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. I know that there's, I had heard some negative things said about the Black Lives Matter movement, and I wanted to hear from their own perspectives what they believe and where it came from. For me, I think it was really interesting to hear their story again. I think I still have a lot to learn, and I don't think it's my place to really speak on things at the moment, but I'm really trying to take in as much as I can right now, and then we'll see where things go from there. But that book also I thought was very eye-opening to the idea of not just what Black people go through, but also specifically in terms of with mental health and how that's viewed and how that's treated, most specifically by police in the Black community, which that's not something that I had really heard about before. It was really interesting, really eye-opening, and it made a lot of sense to me that this is a negative thing that should not be happening and has been happening and needs reviewed and looked into for sure. And I can see why people are upset. And why, they're not just upset, like there are people who are just angry, and I can't put blame on anyone for that. I promise they're not all political. This has started out very political in a way, but also it's just about humanity. I also gave that book 5 stars. So the last book that I listened to strictly on audiobook that I don't have a physical copy to show you was The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek by Kim Michelle Richardson. It looks like this. So the book Women of Troublesome Creek is about this woman who they call Blue because of the cobalt color of her skin, which was an actual thing. Like, well, I guess it kind of is an actual thing that can happen, but there was this family of people that really kind of popularized it that I had never heard of. I had no idea this was a thing. People didn't trust them because of the color of the skin. They thought they were from the devil. And this was also during the time of like segregation. No one knew what to do with these people, and this girl in particular, it follows her story. She is a mountain librarian person who takes books to the people in the mountains who don't have access to it down there. So she works like for the library system, and it really just kind of follows her story. And there's a doctor who comes and he thinks that he can cure her, but it was an actual thing, like even though it's a fictional story, an actual thing that had happened in history that I had no idea about. So it was really interesting to kind of learn about that and delve into it. I enjoyed the story. There were parts of it that were a little slow for my liking, but overall I enjoyed it, and I gave that book 4 stars. So while I have one more book that I did technically listen to on audiobook, I have the physical copy of everything. So I'm going to move forward with the physical copies now. The first physical book that I finished in July may seem kind of silly, but it's Flowers A to Z by Marjolaine Baston. So this book is very, very tiny. It was one of the books that was given to me for my birthday, which was really sweet. I had, my sister made like a book tree out of books that she collected from multiple people as gifts, and this was a simple small one that I actually read to kind of maybe try to help propel me out of a little bit of a reading slump, because like I said before, I didn't really read in June. It quite literally is what it says. It's pictures of different flowers and then a little bit either about the flowers or a reflection of what they mean to her, specifically with these pretty little pictures. It was a cute little gift. I'd be lying if I say I didn't read it just to kind of pad my numbers a little bit and to get back into reading. It didn't do much for me overall, because especially with like the personal stories, they were nice, but it wasn't really a book for me. It's cute. It's like a coffee table book almost. I would leave it in my living room on a side table for someone to check out, but it's not one that I would read because I just love flowers and want to read it. So I ended up giving this one 2 stars. On July 10th, I finished Heat by Stuart Woods. In this book, we follow a character named Jesse Warden who used to work for the FBI and then was framed for murder and something else that happened. And so he ends up in prison, and then he is taken out of prison, and the FBI wants him to do this case for them that has proven to be pretty much impossible. They want him to infiltrate this cult and to find out things about them. And we really just follow him as he enters this cult and learns about it. Personally, I went in and out of enjoying this book. I thought it was more enjoyable than I expected it to be. This was a book that was given to me by a coworker to read. The character of Jesse is interesting. I was rooting for him, but I didn't find him particularly compelling in his own right. He has a tragic backstory, and then he enters this cult, and certain aspects of it I really didn't care for all that much. And the cult, while interesting, was not quite as interesting as I would have hoped a book about a cult would be. It was an interesting read, not one that I would have picked up on my own really ever, and it was not one that I was anticipating out of my pile. There's a reason that I'm just getting to it now. I definitely have been putting this one off, but when I finished it, I gave it overall 3 stars. So the next 3 books that I'm going to show you, I actually read to try and take part of the reading rush this year. So I was anticipating it, I was so excited for it, and then unfortunately I had a tragedy in my family, and I spent the first few days of the reading rush at a funeral and out of town funeral. So I definitely wasn't necessarily in a reading mood, and just life kind of took over. And so I didn't complete a lot of this in the reading rush, but I tried my darndest. Actually, I think I did finish these 3 books in the reading rush. There were like 7 challenges. I had 7 books picked. I finished these 3. And I will tell you what they covered. I ended up finishing 4 challenges with these 3. You'll see why in a second. But the first book I finished was The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. This book, the cover caught my attention right away when I went into the bookstore. I've been watching a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race, and I have a lot of friends, well, not a lot of friends, but I have a fair amount of friends who are also drag queens, and it's just something that I enjoy and something that I'm very interested in. And so I saw this, it drew my attention, and then I read the inside cover. It says that he's a mixed-race gay teen growing up in London, and he's navigating being Greek Cypriot, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and Jamaican, but he's never felt really Greek or black enough, like he really fits in either, and he doesn't really know where he fits in. And then he discovers this drag society, and that's kind of where he figures it out for himself. This is also written like, oh, well, that page isn't going to help you, but it's written in like these like poetry things, so it's not nearly as big and scary as the page count may make it look. And also, I love the book cover itself is pink with flamingos. But the character's name is Michael, and we follow him from like the time he's 6 and asks for a Barbie doll for his birthday to the time when he's in college and finds the drag society. And in it, it tackles a lot of issues, and he really does a lot of self-discovery throughout it, again with both his personal identity, with his race and his background, but also with his sexuality. And I really enjoyed this book. I think some of the stuff that it talked about, it really didn't delve into as much as I would have liked, and that might have been for time's sake, that might have been because of the format it's written in, but I thought it was really enjoyable. I read it really fast. It did not disappoint. I would definitely recommend this book. I'm really trying to get Jocelyn to read it right now, and I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. For the reading rush, it fulfilled a book that takes place on another continent, as well as a book with a title that starts with the word the. The next book I finished for the reading rush was actually the first book I started for it, but it took me a little while to get through it, and that was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This one fulfilled, again, a book that starts with the word the, but also a book with a film adaptation that you've already seen. So it's technically not a film, it's a series on Netflix, but I watched The Haunting of Hill House and I loved it. It's everything that I look for in like a horror film or really like any kind of scary like movie, TV show, where it's spooky and it tells a great story, and the pacing may be a little bit slow at times, but it really just sets a great mood and never gets like too overly gory, because I'm not really into that, and I just loved it. And so knowing that this was kind of the source material that at least inspired it, I wanted to read this right away. Now, I had not realized that I've already read something by Shirley Jackson. When I was in high school, I read The Lottery, and I didn't know that that was by her. She's definitely someone who wrote classic horror literature. This book is not exactly like the show. The show definitely is very different, but I could see where it drew some inspiration from this book. It was spooky, but it wasn't quite what I was hoping for, I don't think, in terms of that. And because it was written in a different time, I did kind of have to remind myself at times what was happening. Sometimes I would have to reread because I wasn't sure what I had just read and what had just happened in the story. But it was a good, spooky story, and taking everything else into consideration, I did enjoy it, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Now, this is more of a light 4, whereas this was like a 4 leaning on 5. This is like a 4 that's like a true 4 leaning towards 3, if I'm putting it in that way. And the last book that I finished in July, I actually listened to as an audiobook, and again, it was for the reading rush, and that was Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire. I used this book for a book that you should read entirely outside of your house. So after going to the funeral, I came back and worked a few days, and then I met my family in the woods for like a little overnight kind of camping trip. And while I was there, I listened to this book outside, and then also in my car driving to and from there. This is the second book in the Wayward Children series, and I am in love. Like, I read the first book, it was wonderful, and then I was a little nervous because my favorite character in the first book is not in this one, so I wasn't sure if I was going to care as much, but oh, did I care. It was so good, and I don't really want to spoil much, especially because it's like, it's a second one in a series. What's really nice is that you don't have to read them in order. You technically don't really have to read all of them if you didn't want to, because they work as standalones. So this is the story of the twins, Jack and Jill, that were in the first book, but it tells the story of what happened to them in their fantasy world before they ended up at the school in the first book. And so it was nice having that frame of reference, also thinking back to the first book. I just loved it. I don't want to give away too much. I honestly think that this series, the less you know going in, the better. This was a true, strong 5-star read for me. So those are all the books that I read in the month of July. I hope you got something out of it. I definitely was glad to finally be back to reading. I learned a lot in this month. I really enjoyed a lot of reading, and it's good to be making videos. Hopefully I'll be making more in the future, be more consistent. That's the goal. Fingers crossed. The life's been a little busy, so we'll see. But I hope you enjoyed this. Have you read any of these books? Did you like them? Did you not? Are you interested in reading any of these? Let me know all of that information down below. Comment, subscribe if you're interested in seeing more future stuff that I make. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I love you all. And don't forget to share them smiles. Ciao for now, friends.